All right. So, chapter 15 here, day three of our new PFT 200. So, I guess I should change that title. I gotta remember to do that after class is over. We're working our way through cardiorespiratory fitness. So, we want you guys to be able to summarize the importance of cardio training. So, we will spend some time talking about the benefits of cardio and why it's so freaking good for us. Outline the general guidelines for how to do it. I'm probably, because I'm very biased, I'm probably going to do a ton of examples today where I'm talking about like, and you're going for a run, you're going for a jog. Guys, when I say cardio, it could be swimming, it could be weights. You can just go to the gym and pick up some weights and make sure that you're not resting adequately. And so you get like your cardio on with kettlebells, dumbbells, battle ropes, resistance bands. It can be an elliptical, it can be jump rope, it can be dancing, absolutely. Like Zumba can be cardio. Any of that stuff, anything that gets your heart rate elevated counts as cardio. Anything that, is big and, easily consistent. Now, me, I'm crazy biased towards running. So I like sports that involve a lot of running. I like going for a jog and clearing my mind. I like hiking, like that kind of stuff. So I'm probably going to use a ton of examples where I'm saying that, but just know running is not the best form of cardio. There is no best form of cardio. They are all equivalent to one another. There's a little bit of like other benefits that come along, like running, jogging, jumping rope, anything that uses gravity for cardio is a little bit better for bone density, whereas like swimming is a little bit better for strength. There's a little bit of, obviously there's more muscle that is kind of involved there. But a little bit for some reason worse for not worse, but like not as good for bone density. They think that it's because gravity is kind of special. They don't really understand why that's the case. Same thing with spin bikes. If you like spinning is a great way to like travel further distances because if you're biking, you get to go way more fun places and see way more fun stuff, which can be great. Like that's really cool. Um, so I love that. But again, like, biking, way better for quad strength, really good for knee health, but a little bit worse for bone density, the same way swimming is, because it's friction instead of gravity as a resistance you know, maybe you don't like any of that traditional cardio stuff. Maybe you just like lifting weights, and so you're trying to find a way to just do weights as cardio. Nothing wrong with that either. That is also a really fantastic way to just get your heart rate up. Anything that you are doing that is an elevated heart rate for extended periods of time, guys, that counts as cardio. All of it counts. We don't need to be cardio snobs in here. Even though I 100% am. Just as a person, I'm totally a cardio snob. Running is the best. As your teacher, it's all the same. So I'm biased off the clock. um, because I like going for a jog. I also think it's the most approachable. It's just the easiest. It's fun to just kind of be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna step out my front door and bada bing, bada boom, I can do my thing. So I'm a big fan of that as well. Um, but that is all my bias talking. All cardio is the same. So we're gonna talk about the benefits. And then we'll talk about stage training. Stage training is really the thing that's probably going to be a little new to you if you've never done any long-term cardio training. Stage training, very similar to NASM's OPT model and levels. It's all about like moving through different stages that put different types of physiological stress. And it's not like a graduation situation. It's not like kung fu or karate. It's not like martial arts where it's like, all right, hey, you used to be, when I was a kid, I was a yellow belt. Uh, and I think the way it worked is I worked my way up I think I started as like a white belt and I worked my way,
Yeah,
and I think I made it, I think the next one was green. I don't know. I made it one more. Don't even
I think
remember.
it's like white, yellow, then orange.
Orange. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because it was like another, that's right. It was another hot color. And then I remember like always wanting to get to like the darker shades. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
uh-huh.
that's what it was. I was like, green is bright. Yeah, no, orange was it. Um, Rising Stars Karate out of Tacoma, Washington. I do remember that. I remember I was the best duck walker in class. That was the one thing I was really good at. I could like
Duck walk.
do the little like knee walk thing better than anybody. Um, So yeah, it's the you progress in that. It would make no sense to take like a black belt, karate master and have them fight someone in, the beginner's class. That would be ridiculous, right? So that's you once you
Yeah.
progress, you're good. You're up there, you're in the top of the class. Cardio doesn't work like that. Cardio, you take somebody who is like crazy advanced, you can still put them on a stage one routine because that's still going to help them develop endurance. It's just their version of endurance. Their heart rate will adapt to that. So, it's cardio is something that like you could take beginners and put them in relatively hard routines as long as they kind of qualify for it. They got to make sure again, all of this is based on whether or not your client's heart can handle this, which is why you have to do your cardiorespiratory assessments before you ever do any of this. But let's say that you take like an advanced client who's been running for years, they've got a really low resting heart rate, a great VO2 max, that person can still go on like a low intensity, long duration cardio routine, you know? And then somebody else who's like relatively new, it could be their very first time, doing an interval routine. And you could put them like in a situation where their heart rate gets to a really high percentage of their max heart rate, and then you let them recover, and then you get them back up to high, and that can improve their VO2 max for the very first time. You know, um, it scales with you, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Daniel, do you have a question? Oh no, I think it might have been a bump. So yeah, so we want to explain our stage training and how to use that, and then we want to understand our considerations for postural distortions. This is a big mistake a lot of people make is they think that like your strength stuff is just based on your strength stuff, and postural distortions are important for making sure that you have good form when you're lifting weights, but it's got to be important to have good form even when you're doing cardio. It's so funny. People think like running has like a very specific form. You got to make sure that you run correctly. Good running form is crucial. Um, but everyone thinks that running is just faster walking and that they are the same thing, but it's totally different. Pretty natural for humans to just walk. It's pretty instinctive for us. We've got it built in. So a lot of people just assume that it's just as instinctive when we start walking fast or when we start running, and that's just not accurate. Like running is something you have to work on the same way that you needed to learn how to do a squat. The same way you need to learn how to do a lunge properly. So. All right, let's take us over here and see if I can find that intro video. Get a little better about showing the NASM videos. I don't show them as often because it's a pain in the butt for me to get into this darn account. I'm not allowed to download them onto my computer. But I sure would. I would just download these things and never go to this website again if I had my choice. Shots fired, NASM. Um, okay. All right. Where I'm gonna be annoyed. This happened to me yesterday. If that video isn't on here again. This is the other thing. They move this stuff around. Oh boy. I just realized, what I should do is I should just write down what page there it is, what page every one of these darn things is on, and then have like a sticky note on my monitor at all times. All right, so chapter 15, lesson 2, page 8. All right. So just really quickly, we're going to get into this in just a second. We're going to talk about our fit principles. So, I guess I should finish doing my introduction first. So, when we talk about like what cardiorespiratory fitness is, right? It's the ability of your cardiorespiratory system, that's your heart, blood, and blood vessels, that's cardiovascular, as well as your respiratory pump and respiratory passageways, that's your lungs, to gather oxygen from the environment and then supply it through the rest of the body. So your cardiorespiratory fitness is responsible for keeping your biceps running. It's responsible for keeping your small intestine alive. It's literally extracting oxygen and providing that oxygen throughout the entire body so that we can metabolize and stay alive, right? So it literally is responsible for everything, which is why it's so important to make sure that we keep this system healthy. So cardiorespiratory fitness, right, is the ability of your cardiovascular and respiratory systems to provide oxygen during activity. The more active you are, the more stuff you're using. The more stuff you're using, the more stuff needs fuel. The more stuff needs fuel, the more you're going to need to be able to extract that fuel from the environment and deliver it where it needs to go. So your cardiorespiratory fitness is not only going to help you feel more fit during physical activity, it's also going to help you have more energy for all the activities of normal daily living. Um, and it makes literally everything else in your life a little bit easier. But it is very important because your heart is, does have to work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It never gets a break. It has not had a break since before you were born, because your heart is so important. We can't just like make it super, like you can make your biceps super sore and then you're just like the next like couple days you're like, oh my God, like, well, I guess I'm just not using my arm for the next 3 days, like you can't do that with your cardio, you know what I mean? Like it is something you have to make sure that you're progressing correctly, and it doesn't necessarily adapt quite as quickly as like some of the other systems do. Now, I will say strength adapts pretty quick, neurological strength especially. Like you'll have your clients, you'll start training them, and they'll get relatively strong like pretty quick. Actually, the adaptations for like brand new clients is pretty speedy. We call it newbie gains. um and I'm not necessarily talking about just like newbie gains is often talking about like muscle growth. You do get a lot of growth also like relatively early, because it's just all new and your body's like Wah! Like it just adapts like crazy in the beginning. But a lot of those improvements are neurological. A lot of just you learn how to do something correctly. It is you adapt pretty quickly to learning how to stand on one leg. You know what I mean? Or how to use a cable machine without it wobbling like crazy. You get used to it relatively fast. Um, Now but strength, like yeah, the advanced strength, that's going to take a very long time. Cardio adaptations in the beginning can also feel a little fast, and relatively quick. That actually is more chemistry than it is physiology. I mean, it is still physiology, but it's more chemical than it is like physical or mechanical. Your cardio will actually, like, if you do just a few weeks of dedicated cardio and you really like plug away at it and you pay really close attention to making sure that you're working hard enough the whole time instead of just like zoning out, which is so easy to do during cardio. um, you'll notice that like you're gonna feel way better pretty quickly. And then like your cardio is gonna get relatively easier pretty quickly at the beginning. And a lot of that is actually more enzymes in your blood that make it a little bit easier for oxygen to bind and unbind and move to where it needs to go and move to where it doesn't need to go. Like that enzyme activity that you generate, it's actually pretty good. Now, it's a two-edged sword because enzymes also go away really quickly. They only live for, 3 or 4 days at the most. Enzymes are pretty short-lived little critters. And so you take some time off. It's also why if you've ever taken a break from the gym, you just missed a week. You know what I mean? It's like, I was on vacation, you take 1 week off from the gym. Whoo, that week you're back feels way rougher. Now, and people, it sometimes is really discouraging. They're like, oh my God, I lost all my progress because I went out of town for 6 days. And it's like, no, 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 no. But I get where you're coming from. It feels like you lost a lot of progress. Uh,
Doesn't it though? But it does. It does feel like your body just,
Feels rough,
it
right?
does, right?
Yeah, that's all enzyme activity, which again will come back pretty quickly. So go back to the gym for a week. It's not like you get lost, a ton of physical prowess and then you gained it all back 1 week later. Neither of those really make a ton of sense. You know what I mean? But I totally get it because up here it feels so rough. Like I've done it playing frisbee, I take like 1 week off playing ultimate frisbee and I'm still working out regularly, but I just miss a game. I'll come back the next week and I'm like, this is terrible. Like,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of it is just like a lot of it is just enzymes. A lot of it is also psychological. And so you
Okay.
just like kind of feel into it a little bit more than you really should. But in terms of actual like long-term progress and substantial progress, like also a lot of the gains I'm talking about are maybe the difference between like a 3.5 on the treadmill and like a 4.1. You know what I mean? Like not a huge, huge, huge difference here. Um, so the rate of progression will eventually be pretty slow, actually. Cardio is not the fastest thing to adapt in the world, but in the beginning, it actually really does. Your body's like, oh my gosh, I guess we need enzymes. It's really good about doing that in the beginning, which is great because it is that really good first boost that your clients get, where they're like, oh my gosh, I notice a difference. That is amazing. It's amazing for a new client on a journey. But you do have to make sure that you don't let them like crash and burn when the rest of their progress is not that fast. So always prepare for that psychological bit. So rate of progression is really important because you don't get to really just rest your heart when you're done with cardio. So making sure that we don't just take somebody who is, new to exercise and then just make them sprint their, legs off. Making sure that we're not just like progressing them into the most advanced routines in the world, like right out the gate is really important. So rate of progression is a key thing to talk about. And it's always important to make sure that you are monitoring intensity. But there's tons of benefits to cardio. Obviously, like it makes you more active and easier to have, lots of energy in everyday life. It's going to combat like, that said all the disadvantages that we get from the sedentary lifestyles that we have. And, the nice thing about cardio, like cardio is not superior to burning fat two weights for the record. Like nothing is superior when it comes to like weight loss and stuff. Um, Cardio doesn't burn more calories than weights does. Weights doesn't burn more calories than cardio does. If we're talking about like traditional cardio machines and stuff, there's no best cardio, there's no best any of that stuff. That's not really how that works. It's all just like math and energy consumption. But cardio is so popular in weight loss routines because what is really nice is it is super easy to calculate. If you're like, oh, I had an extra 250 calorie cupcake today, I need to go burn 250 calories. I burn 110 calories every 30 minutes at this speed on the treadmill. So I need to do 68 minutes. You know what I mean? Like it's 66 minutes. It's so easy to kind of run your numbers and calculate with cardio. And that's why it is good for weight loss. Why it's so popular amongst weight loss routines. It's a very significant calorie burn over a significant period of time. It's just easy to run those numbers. Um, so we definitely need to know, how to do that. All right, you know what I'm gonna do instead? I've been talking so much and I forgot I was doing intros and stuff. Let's give you guys your first break right now, and then we'll come back and we'll launch the video and then I'll go through the fit principles and stuff. That'll be a better way to do it.
Nice, nice.
Got it.
Otherwise, I'm gonna get behind on my break schedule again. We're gonna get out of here at 4 p.m. All right, so 9:28. Let's get back at 9:38. I'm gonna pause this record. I'm gonna remember to pause the recordings. I'm gonna do a good job of that today. Danielle, I see that. Hold on. Are you still with me?
I'm here. I can wait until we come back.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll wait till we come back. We're perfect.
Okay. Well, okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye.
Sorry, I just didn't see. I had my banner hidden behind the video. I didn't see it the way I normally do. All right. Danielle, what was your question?
I was going to ask the both of you, do you feel like you're at an advantage because you know what to do to get your body in shape? Like you're like, I can slack, I know what to do. Do either of you have that?
Um, oh, do I?
Like
No,
sometimes you're like, I can slack, I know what to do to get myself back in shape. Like I can afford to do, or I can afford to take a week off. I can afford to take a vacation. I know what to do to get myself back in. Or I could binge really bad stuff for a while because I know what to do to get. Do you guys have that mentality?
I think
Most
so. I think most people have that mentality, actually. I would argue that that is how most people think.
I'll say yeah because I know that like like sometimes I say that I'm fine. I don't have to do this and I don't have to work out because like naturally I just like I kind of just stay the same. I've been the same since like fifth grade.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my body just always just goes back to just being slim, just the slim man. And I guess I give myself I don't know some grace for not going to the gym, but I don't go to the gym as much as I would like to.
Yeah,
Because
genetics, I mean, genetics definitely play like a huge role. And so you kind of get used to that. But then I also think that like I think that's sometimes like a mistake that some people make is they assume that it's going to be fine and that they can always just like
Yeah.
later. Um, but I would say, yeah, I think that is a mistake, and I do think that I fall for it.
you know
Yeah.
what? I'll be honest with you. So I tested it, and I gotta be honest with you. I think this information or what we know, it becomes like rhythmatic. I truly believe that once this becomes your path, it
Uh-huh.
also becomes your rhythm.
Ooh,
Sure.
make
I really do. Like
Yeah, I
I'm,
mean,
you know what I
you
really
get
because I know exactly what to do almost to get exactly what I need when I need it or my body to do a certain thing.
yeah, I mean your hobbies, right? Like if your habits become your hobbies, it's a lot easier to, stick to and adhere to something, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, which is why like I'm always trying to tell people I'm like you got to find a way to make working out as easy for you as like as bulletproof as possible, that's such a crazy important thing to do.
Yeah,
It's
for a long time
it's
I used to
not.
think, I'm sorry. For a
Oh no,
long time I used to
go
think,
ahead.
for a long time I used to think I took it for granted, but what I'm starting to realize, to be honest with you, Brad, it becomes almost a part of your DNA. When you've been doing this so long and like, we're sitting here, we're taking in this information. I feel like when you surround yourself with something, it becomes a part of you.
Yeah, yeah. It's very yeah. It's instinctive. Yeah, part of your habits. Like you don't. It's like waking up at the same time. Like it's so funny. Like you get so used to waking. If you start waking up early for like your job or whatever, and then it's like it's Saturday, you shouldn't wake up early, but your body's like, too bad. Like you got up at 6:30 every day this week. I'm not sleeping it. Like your body's like used to it. I had to do that this morning. I just like came out here because I was like tossing and turning in bed.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's good stuff. It's rhythmatic for me now.
yeah.
And taking this class is just reinforcing, it's just taking me to a higher level of consciousness in this.
Yeah. I love that. It's funny. Yeah, conscious effort is always going to be great. It's funny though. You do want it to be, yeah, you want it to be automatic, which is like very unconscious in its way. But it's easy to fall into the bad automatic stuff. Um, I love that. Okay, so I am going to yeah, I'm gonna play I'm gonna do this in a different order. So we're gonna watch this quick little
So
video. I'm basically just gonna
there's
repeat
a
it.
school called RRFC,
Uh-oh.
recording radio film. Absolutely.
Let me tell you.
Breakdown integrated.
Sorry.
What is that?
Uh,
Are you
this,
taking another class during my class? I swear to God.
no, 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 I'm not.
No, that's so sounded like a lesson. I don't know what that was, but that sounded like a lesson. If you are cheating on me with like some other class, I'm gonna be furious.
Nah, you're all good. You're
I'm
the
a
only one I
very
talk to.
jealous teacher. Nah.
You're the only one I talk to.
All right, how do I let me hide the video here. There we go. And make sure that sound share is on. Okay, here we go.
Without principles and formulas, we'd all be kind of lost, right? Sometimes you have to tap into the analytical, mathematic side of your brain to come up with different ways to put workout components together to add up to a great workout for your clients. And don't worry, we got your back with a tried and true formula. Fitness professionals need to understand and appreciate the fact that no two individuals will ever respond and adapt to cardiorespiratory exercise in exactly the same way. Physical and perceptual responses to exercise are highly variable, even among individuals of similar age, fitness, and health. So all exercise training recommendations, including cardiorespiratory exercise, has to be individually determined and should use the FIT-VP principle. FIT-VP stands for frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment, volume, and progression. And we are going to go over all of those things right now. Frequency is the number of training sessions in a given time period, usually per week. Moderate intensity exercise, like brisk walking, should be done at least 5 times per week. If we're talking vigorous intensity exercise, like jogging or running, it should be done at least 3 times per week. You could also do a little combo platter of moderate and vigorous intensity exercise. What do I mean by intensity? Intensity refers to the level of demand that a given activity places on the body. For general health requirements, such as reducing the risk of chronic disease, moderate intensity is the recommended go-to. Moderate exercise typically represents an intensity range which is enough of a demand to increase heart and respiratory rate, but doesn't cause exhaustion or breathlessness for the average untrained healthy adult. Basically, this sort of individual should be able to talk comfortably during exercise or physical activity. Higher intensities are generally required for improvements in overall fitness and conditioning. However, any combination of the two will also lead to improved health. So, how do you figure out how to build a plan for a person's unique needs? Cardiorespiratory exercise intensity can be monitored in several ways. Methods for monitoring cardio exercise intensity include calculating VO2 max, using percentages of maximal heart rate, percentages of heart rate reserve, metabolic equivalents, or METs, ratings of perceived exertion, and using the talk test. Several of these methods are more practical for fitness professionals to implement with clients than others, and we'll get into that next. The traditional gold standard measurement for cardiorespiratory fitness is VO2 max, often expressed as the maximal volume of oxygen consumed per kilogram of body weight per minute. In other words, VO2 max is the maximal amount of oxygen that an individual can use during intense exercise. This method of testing is awesome, to the max. Once VO2 max is determined, a common method to establish exercise training intensity is to have clients exercise at a percentage of their VO2 max. However, accurately measuring VO2 max can be impractical because it requires clients to perform cardiorespiratory exercise at maximal effort, while sophisticated equipment monitors the client's ventilation response. As a result, sub-maximal aerobic tests have become popular for fitness professionals to estimate VO2 max instead. Calculating maximal heart rate is another method for establishing training intensity during cardio exercise. Although measuring a client's actual maximal heart rate is effective, it also requires testing clients at maximal capacity. So it might be a bit impractical for most fitness professionals and their clients. Subsequently, many mathematical formulas that estimate maximal heart rate have been developed. Once maximal heart rate is calculated, you can have clients exercise at a certain percentage of their calculated maximal heart rate. Arguably the most commonly used formula for estimating maximal heart rate is the Haskell's formula, or 220 minus age. However, this formula was never intended to be used as an instrument for designing cardio fitness programs because maximal heart rate varies significantly among individuals of the same age. For this reason, more appropriate regression formulas have been developed, like the Tanaka formula shown here. It's been shown that this formula is more accurate for estimating maximal heart rate. Keep in mind, fitness professionals should never use this or any other mathematical formula as an absolute. A person's heart rate response to exercise is dependent on additional factors, including genetics, medications, and even things like whether or not they had some coffee. But on the plus side, Tanaka's formula is simple to use as a general starting point for measuring cardiorespiratory training intensity. Now let's talk heart rate reserve, also known as the Carvonen method. Using this method, a client's target heart rate is established based on the difference between their estimated maximal heart rate and their resting heart rate. This formula is likely more appropriate versus only calculating a percentage of maximal heart rate because it considers an individual's resting heart rate, which tends to vary from person to person. Another measurement of intensity is called metabolic equivalence, or METs. METs are used to describe the energy cost of physical activity as multiples of resting metabolic rate. For example, slow jogging is about 4 METs, or 4 times resting metabolic rate. There are tons of resources available for CPTs that describe common activities and their average MET values. I will mention that it's a little bit of an uncommon practice to use this method in a fitness facility. Let's look at one of the more popular methods. Ratings of perceived exertion, or RPE, is a technique used to validate how hard a client feels they are working during exercise. When using the RPE method, a person is subjectively rating the perceived difficulty of exercise based on their physical sensations, such as increased heart rate, increased respiration rate, increased sweating, and muscle fatigue. The client's subjective rating should be reported based on the overall feelings of how hard they are working, including an overall sense of fatigue, and not just isolated areas of the body. Although the RPE scale is a subjective measure, if clients report their exertion ratings accurately, RPE does provide a good estimate of exercise training intensity. There are 2 versions of RPE, and for simplicity, NASM recommends for fitness professionals to use the 1 to 10 scale with their clients, unless their clients are already familiar with the 6 to 20 Borg scale. Here's another good technique: the talk test. Historically, the talk test has been an informal method used to gauge training intensity during exercise. The belief has always been that if a client reaches a point at which they're breathing too hard and not able to carry on a simple conversation during exercise, then they're probably exercising at a high intensity level. Several studies have now confirmed the validity of the talk test. It appears that the talk test really can help fitness professionals and clients monitor proper exercise intensity without having to rely on measuring heart rate or VO2 max. Next in line is time. Time refers to the length of time an individual is engaged in an activity or exercise training session. It is typically expressed in minutes. According to the most current public health guidelines on physical activity, adults should accumulate 2.5 hours of moderate intensity aerobic activity every week, or an hour and 15 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity per week. You can also do an equivalent mix of moderate and vigorous intensity aerobic activity. The guidelines also say that if adults exceed 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity, or 150 minutes a week of vigorous intensity activity, then they will gain even more health and fitness benefits. It's important to appreciate that any time spent on physical activity, regardless of the individual or accumulated time, is going to provide some positive health benefits. Type refers to the mode of activity selected. There are 3 criteria that have to be met for an activity or exercise to be considered aerobic. It should be rhythmic, use large muscle groups, and be continuous in nature. Some examples would be jogging, walking, working on a cardio machine, swimming, cycling, and so on. You get the idea. In addition to recognizing modes or types of cardio exercise, it's also important for fitness professionals to be familiar with various cardio formats. Many of these formats involve stressing both aerobic and anaerobic energy pathways and include things like interval training, high-intensity interval training, Tabata, and fartlek training. These formats can be challenging, invigorating, and fun. But it's always important to choose a format that's appropriate for your client based on their needs, goals, abilities, and tolerance to exercise. That's a pretty good segue to the next subject: enjoyment. I think this component of exercise programming is often overlooked or not considered more seriously. I mean, if we aren't enjoying all of this, then how will our clients enjoy what we designed for them? Exercise adherence rates decline significantly when a specific mode of exercise is selected for a client before considering their personality type, previous exercise experiences, and other interests. If the exercise training program isn't fun for a client, it's highly likely that they will not adhere to it, and therefore not achieve their personal health and fitness goals. A client is much more likely to continue with a program that's challenging and fun. Give them a supportive environment rather than one that's dull and boring. You and your clients will both have a better time if you take fun more seriously. Okay, last 2. First, volume of exercise represents the total amount of work performed in each time frame, typically 1 week. As mentioned earlier, guidelines recommend 2.5 hours of moderate intensity aerobic activity every week. This equates to 150 minutes. Or clients can do 1 hour and 15 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity every week. This equates to 75 minutes. Or clients can opt for an equivalent mix of the two. However, 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity may only provide modest weight loss. Clients who want to lose weight will likely achieve greater benefits from the inclusion of at least 250 minutes of aerobic exercise per week. Research also reveals for general health improvements and the prevention of weight gain, individuals should aim to expend 1,200 to 2,000 calories through physical activity per week. That's going to be a hard target to hit through structured exercise alone, so remind your clients to up their non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, activities too. NEAT activities include things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking in the furthest parking spot, and doing household chores. And finally, progression. Progression refers to how an exercise program advances. Exercise protocols should gradually progress in intensity and volume to continually challenge your clients. The rate of progression should be specific to the individual and their needs, goals, and abilities. There's a lot to consider when you're designing programs for your clients. Knowing all stages, methods, and formulas in the FIT VP principle will give you a whole landscape of ideas to pull from. Trust your knowledge and creativity as the first thing that figures in. Then, take the client's health status, physical abilities, and responses to exercises as the second part of the equation. The sum of those parts will be fitness plans that are unique as each person.
Okay. So, FIT principles here. Where's my video? Hold on. So, fit principles are a big way for us to prescribe exercise intensity to our clients, and they're the things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to like designing a good cardio routine. I love that NASM is actually really, they were the first ones to add the extra E onto the fit principles. You know, it used to just be FITT, but then they were like, look, we're writing great programs for people, and no one wants to do them. You know, like everybody hates this. So they were like, you know, there really became kind of a big need to modify how we were like doing cardio, and you know, teaching people how to do it in ways that was like enjoyable, you know, because something that's enjoyable that somebody adheres to more often is always going to be more effective than to something that is unenjoyable that somebody might do, you know, every now and then, but like because they don't like it. I mean, Danielle, you were really insightful. This is kind of the conversation we just had a minute ago, you know. If somebody doesn't like their cardio routine, they're not going to stick to it. So, you know, you were asking about like whether or not it kind of feels easier to kind of jump back into things. Sure, because I like what I get to do, you know. Always going to be easier to jump in and to retake up a hobby that I enjoy. Clients that don't like their cardio routines, though, they're not going to get that, you know. So maybe that's our job, is just showing people like, you know, how to get them to have the same passion for the stuff that we have, you know. So fit principles: frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment, volume, and progression. So it has become fit VP. It is very funny. It originally this was like FITT, then it was like FITTE, and then it's FITTEV, FITTEVP. You know, like it's like this acronym has just gotten longer and longer over time. But yeah, frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment. That was the original. Well, I guess not enjoyment, but and in volume and progression, right? We got to make sure that we're taking into account, you know, how the overall volume, because you know, maybe sometimes if it's too enjoyable, your client might do it too often, and then they end up with an overuse injury. You know, my buddy Ryan, bless him, I play frisbee with him on Saturdays. Um, and he goes to this Monday, Wednesday, Friday ultimate game as well over in Burbank that I've gone to a few times. I'll sometimes go to the Wednesday one. Um, but like, you know, he keeps getting injured a lot over the last year, and it's like, yeah, man, you're playing 4 days of intense cardiovascular sports a week. That's a lot, you know. We're playing 2.5, 3 hours sometimes. So, you know, his volume is through the roof. But so our recommended volume overall is going to be 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week. So moderate intensity activity, that's kind of what I was describing earlier when I said like, hey, I want you to feel your breath, but I don't want you to ever be out of breath. You know, don't get me wrong, there are times that I'm going to ask you to get out of breath. You know, those are our more intense routines. But, you know, in this case, it's just I want you to be, you know, breathing relatively difficult, doing cardio, but you shouldn't feel like you're ever like out of breath. Or yeah, 3 days a week. That could be 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity activity. So, like, these are the bare minimums that we've seen that have been shown to basically limit cardiovascular degradation, like over time. These are, you know, this is not enough to probably see like cardiovascular improvements. That should be noted. 150 minutes a week, that's only 30 minutes a day. 75 minutes a week, that could be 15 minutes a day if it's vigorous intensity. That is out of breath, by the way. That has been enough to show, like, to fight off the effects of cardiovascular disease. It's probably not enough to actually improve your cardio. It's probably not enough to actually make you fitter, but it is enough to sort of like stave off the negative physiological impacts of just like a sedentary lifestyle and, you know, sort of regular aging, right? So if we're looking at that, right, Oh, and then if you can get 3 to 5 days a week of a combination of vigorous and moderate, that's been shown to probably be the most effective. And so, yeah, your classic, like if you can go to the gym 60 minutes, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and have like a good combination of like strength and cardio in that 60 minutes, those 3 different times, right? That's 180 minutes a week right there. And you are combining like strength with cardiovascular intensity. That is enough to definitely combat the effects of, cardiovascular disease over time. It really doesn't have to be, 7 days a week. And then there's all the other stuff like outside of the gym as well, which we're going to talk about at the end. So yeah, frequency, intensity, time type, and enjoyment, right? So in terms of frequency, if your intensity is high, you can get away with less frequency. You can get away probably 3 days a week. If your intensity is low, you're probably going to need to do a little bit more often, and that's okay. Like my mom, good example, right? I want her to do low intensity, high frequency, where like she can do, very little maximal effort, but she can do it many times, and that's going to be a lot easier for her to recover from. Hopefully, eventually, she'll get to a place where we can make that intensity a little bit higher, and then she can, take less time dedicated to exercising all the time. Hopefully. So, frequency is how often you are going to perform a particular exercise. 3 to 5 days a week is a combination of vigorous to moderate intensity is probably going to be best. One of my favorite schedules is just your classic Monday through Friday. Lifting weights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a little bit of cardio, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Danielle, we've talked about this before. I know you are a blend person. You like to put your cardio and your strength together.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that either, And you can do, if you want, you can do longer sessions. You can even do like 90-minute sessions. But I will say, if you do that, and then you can get away with less days per week. If you do something like that, just make sure after about an hour, you probably want a little bit of a glucose boost. Small little snack in between, like just before that last 30 minutes is actually probably going to help. Just make sure that you don't have any mental fatigue and make sure that you're not like getting sloppy with your form and things like that. So I do encourage my clients they're on like a longer routine to get like a little bit of glucose in the middle of their routines. The classic bodybuilder method is like Sour Patch Kids or like gummy worms.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what
I,
I eat.
yeah,
Like
I'd say like a piece of fruit, like something a little more natural. Or even just like maybe just a few calories from like a sports drink or something, But just be cautious, some of those can be really high in sugar. So then we've got intensity. Intensity is the level of demand. Now, this is where she went through all of them in the video, but we got to do a little bit of math here. So now there is the VO2 max method in terms of exercise intensity. This is the best. The best one you're going to find out there is monitoring your VO2 max. However, monitoring your VO2 max is pretty sophisticated in terms of the equipment needed. Now you can find this, by the way, if you guys are ever interested, and if you're ever really just kind of fascinated by it, you can do VO2 max testing. I'm gonna do North Hollywood, and you can find like a VO2 max testing facility that has one of these machines. And basically, the way VO2 max testing works, it's pretty simple. It's actually pretty simple science. It just needs a really fancy machine to do it. But basically, this little mask that you wear has an intake valve and an outtake valve, and both of them are going to go through this machine. So, if you told me that you weigh, let's say 67, so let's say you weigh 70 kilograms, right? I could punch that information into the machine, and the machine will know that and say, okay, well then, we expect, this much oxygen consumption to happen. So then you get on the machine and you start walking at first, just warming up. And the machine's going to measure how many units of oxygen come out. Let's just say we're going to pick a fake number here. Let's just say 100 units of oxygen are coming out. Now, when you're at rest, the average person consumes 70% of the oxygen they bring in. So your volume of oxygen consumed is around 70% when you are at rest. So if you were asleep, and you breathed 100 units in, 70 units of CO2 would come out because you've exchanged 100 units of oxygen for 70 units of CO2, but the remaining 30 units didn't get used. So there's 30 units of oxygen that also come out. So the machine is measuring how much oxygen goes in and how much CO2 and oxygen comes out. Now, eventually, what it'll be is like, exercise starts right around like a 0.8, like I think 0.81. And so like when it's 100 units of oxygen go in and 81 units of CO2 come out, you've hit exercising. Eventually it becomes 85, 86, 89, 90, 95. And then there's a moment where you're going to hit what's called your anaerobic threshold. And it is where you're going to run out of, like, you are using all of the oxygen coming in. Okay. So 100 units come in, 100 units of CO2 come out. Okay. No oxygen comes out. There's no leftover oxygen. For the record, as this intensity is climbing, the units would have gone from like 100 to like 150. You'd start consuming more because you'd be breathing harder. So you'd be bringing in more units. But again, we're trying to keep our math simple here, so I don't have to deal with unround numbers. Nobody wants me to try to figure out what the percentage of 142 is. Let's say, so eventually you hit that anaerobic threshold. And while you're doing this VO2 test, there's another thing that you're doing simultaneously, and that is you are wearing a heart rate monitor. So the machine is actually monitoring where you are in terms of oxygen consumption, which can help you determine where you're burning fat most efficiently or where you're developing cardiovascular fitness the most effectively without pushing too hard, without not pushing hard enough. And so the machine is tying all of that to some numbers that are your heart rate as it's going. So you get like a digital readout that looks something kind of like this. Every brand's going to be a little bit different, but there's the one I'm familiar with. Okay, hold on. This is okay, that's the Armor. Hold on. The machine can also do resting metabolism measurement as well. For VO2 max readout. Let's show that. There we go. So what's really cool is it can actually break down for you, hey, your heart rate was 92 beats per minute when you started. You hit your anaerobic threshold. You consumed, you were officially like kicking into aerobic effort around 110. You hit your anaerobic threshold at 141. So this is where this guy was officially out of breath, right? 141. But then he was able to push to full maximal oxygen consumption at 169. And that's the number where he's going to tap out. He's going to hit 160. And that's how this machine works, by the way. Unfortunately, if you ever do this test, it is like the protocols that we used when I did it was we would put you on the treadmill, we'd warm you up, and the machine would actually give you a readout, and it would like help you do it. If it was like, if you were going too slow, it would say like, hey, speed up, and it's like increase intensity. So if it ever did that, it overrided what I would do. But we would alternate 1 mile per hour faster with 2 incline. So like, let's say like Bobby Tony, I warm you up on like a 3.5 at like a 0 incline. The machine's like, hey, go faster. I'm like, all right. So I take it to a 4. And then once I'm at 4, I'm just going to use round numbers. So then like the next 1 minute later, so 60 seconds later, I would take it to a 4, but with a 2 incline. Minute after that, I'd take it to a 5 with a 2 incline. Then let's say the machine is like, hey, make it harder. I would hit, the intensity. And then when the minute goes off, I'd hit the intensity again. So basically, we amped you up really, really, really quickly. That way it didn't take, VO2 max test took 20 minutes, including explanation time. So this guy got to 169. That's his full-blown VO2 max. In terms of how much oxygen he was consuming when he started, it was only around 6.7 units, so pretty low. And eventually he got as high as 35 units. So that's not bad, this guy's fitness level could be better for sure. He's doing okay. He's not great. Ideally we'd want a VO2 consumption higher than that. because the more you can consume, it means the more mitochondria you have. So we'd probably want this guy to improve over time, which is great, you know. Oh, and then we'd also marks out your recovery. This is kind of cool. You can see his peak was 173 on his heart rate. That was the highest it ever got read. And then after 1 minute, his heart rate actually went up higher. So he actually did not recover 1 minute later. And then after 2 minutes, he was about 23% recovered. He is not recovering very quickly. That tells us that he really should improve his cardiovascular health. That's definitely showing us like, hey, we really want to, you know, make sure we're focused on like improving your cardio. So he's probably not going to qualify for these more intense zones. Zones 5, 4, and 3, not doing that with this client. We're going to start him with building up his zones 1 and 2 and getting into his anaerobic threshold a little, you know, just teasing that a little bit. So you got a quality score of 90, which is, yeah, that's just how well the machine works. But yeah, now the other really nice thing, here's the really, really, really cool thing. It also gives him a readout of how many calories per hour he burns based on what his heart rate was. So if he could get his heart rate to 110, which is pretty easy for him, because look, 110, right? If his heart rate is 110, that is less than his zone 1. So he can definitely handle that. I'll probably get him somewhere between 110 and probably like 130 and take him maybe up to 132. And what's really great is it can actually show you how many calories he can burn per hour. So if I can get him on the treadmill or whatever piece of cardio equipment, and I can say, what's the guy's name? Jason. I can say, hey, Jason, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on Tuesday, that's your homework day. I want you to show up. I want you to do your foam rolling. I want you to do your stretches. I want you to go hop on a piece of cardio equipment, wear your heart rate monitor, and I want your heart rate to be somewhere between 120 and 132. If it ever gets above 132, dial it back. I want you to take it easier, right? If it ever gets below 120, amp it up. I want you to make it a little bit harder. Throw on a TV show, you know, watch an episode of whatever, and do that for 45 minutes, right? Then do your foam rolling, do your stretches. You know, if you want to throw some extra core work in there, I'm not going to stop you. I think that's a good thing to do, right? Get out of the gym in an hour. You know, don't be in there for 6 hours a day. Like, you know, I want you to enjoy this, right? And if you do that, he'll burn somewhere between 444 and 492 calories, right? That's pretty good. You know, he does that by, you know, the other days he's going to do his strength training, right? Might burn a little bit more, might burn a little bit less, depending on how hard it is, right? But if he just does that as cardio, that's a difference of, let's say, 1,500 calories per week. He doesn't even change his dietary habits. Let's say he keeps his dietary habits exactly the same, right? He'll burn just about a half a pound of fat, a little bit under, you know, 0.42. He'll burn just about a half a pound of fat per week doing that cardio routine. Not to mention, he'll probably, again, remember, he's not changing his dietary habits. He'll probably actually get slightly better results than that, because there is also the extra calories burned after exercise is over. We'll talk about that at the end of today's lesson. But yeah, that's why VO2 max is so great. This is probably my favorite method. However, that machine is, I think, 15 grand. How much is a core VO2 max machine? How much does that cost? It was, I mean, it could be cheaper now. I mean, technology has changed since I did this. How much do these things cost? Close that.
Let's say 11,000.
What's that?
Let's say 11,543.
All right, 11,543. $1, Bob. Let's find out. The cardio coach. They're not putting it on there. How dare you? Okay, hold on.
Okay.
How much does a core cardio coach cost? Oh, we are both wrong. 6,495. That's pretty good. I'm telling you, this was like the one we had. I remember our boss talked about it all the time. They're like, "You be careful," because it was like 15 grand. That's awesome. But I will say, if
Are we
you
saying that's how much people are paying cardio coaches? Is that what we just said?
no, how much that's how much the machine costs.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wait a minute. I was like, what? Huh?
So
Okay.
generally something like this costs like $110 to $150. If you want to go get this readout, that's how much you would charge a client. And then I will say, you do have to buy all the other stuff. You got to buy the hoses and the tube attachments. You got to get the right cleaning materials and, all that stuff. I guess the warranty is $500 a year. That's insane. Is that a $20,000 treadmill? That treadmill better have the machine on it. Okay. That is part of the machine. Okay. That's like, okay. So they now invented a treadmill that's like has the machine built into it. They bought a $30,000 spin bike with the machine built into it. That's cool. I will say there is another company that did come out. I do know this, and this one's only $5,000, and to me seems actually way better. But Core is the one that I used when I did this stuff. What was it called? The Cardio Bluetooth VO2 Max Tester. What was this called? The VO2 Master. This one's well, this was $5,000. Now it's $8,000. This is $8,000, and it's just a strapped onto your like it uses like internal stuff. That's amazing. Like that's really cool. That's $7,500, and it's just the mask all by itself. And then it gives you a readout to your phone. That's amazing. Now, again, like you would have to make a business out of this to pay for this. No personal trainer should be buying this unless they intend to do constant VO2 max testing. But, it is kind of cool because it also can test your resting metabolic rate. So what that is like, the BMR that we've used, the RMR that we've used to calculate how many calories somebody burns per day, that formula is not always perfect. It makes a lot of assumptions. So you could have a client, and you'll experience this, guys. You'll have a client and you'll run their numbers. You'll do their BMR test and then run the numbers for them and be like, all right, so your weight loss calories are this number. And then they'll go on the diet and they'll get no results. And it's like, what the heck? And it's like the formula is assuming you are the same as the person that the formula was written on, 100 years ago or whatever. So it's not that stuff's not always perfect. So the RMR tester can show whether or not you have a high or a slow metabolism. Can be really nice for that. So it's the same machine because it uses the same science. So yeah, maybe if you had a business that was, you go to people's houses, you bring a mobile spin bike or a treadmill or something, and you do mobile VO2 testing and then you use that to coach your clients. That could be really cool. But generally, go find a lab and go do this if you're interested. Now, most people are not. Also, it's a really hard test. You get nauseous after pushing that hard that quick. It's a pretty brutal test. But it is the most accurate. Now, beyond that, there is also like using a percentage of estimated max heart rate, right? So the original version was 220 minus your age, right? That was the original formula. And it's not bad, but again, she mentions in the video actually, its big drawback is that it didn't take into account people who actually exercise. Like it was designed more for individual just general heart rate max. It wasn't necessarily designed with the intention of being used for exercise and physical activity. So there is also the Tanaka formula, which is a little bit more accurate. That's 208 minus 70% of your age. So, if you took somebody and you're trying to figure out their heart rate max or trying to figure out their target heart rate, let's say you want somebody to work between 60 and 70% of their heart rate max. Okay. So they're 43 years old. That tells us that their heart rate max using the original formula is going to be 220 minus 43. Is 177, right? Is that right? Nah, so I gotta check my math. Yep. Or you can use the Tanaka formula. And that's going to be 208 minus 43 times 0.7, so 73%. So 70%. So what is that? 43 times 0.7, 30.1 equals 208 times 30.1. So 178. So that ended up almost being exactly the same, you know? So there's our two, you know, if we're trying to work at, if there's our two heart rate maxes, right? There's our maximal effort. If I want my client to work at 70% of that, right? We'll say 60 to 70% of that. I would just take those numbers, 177 times 0.6, 7 times 0.7. And I'd say, all right, Bob, I want you anywhere between 106 and 124. I'm going to round up. Any lower than 106, I want you to hit that plus sign. Any higher than 124, I want you to hit that minus sign. Take it a little easier, you know? And it's not bad, guys. Like, honestly, if that's what you have access to in like your first couple training sessions, do it. This works decently well, you know? But you're probably already thinking that you can see a little bit of an issue with this version of things, which is the assumption that everybody who is 43 years old is in the same cardiovascular shape, right? And we know like a good, strong heart has a lower resting heart rate, right? We know that somebody with a really good, very strong heart, you know, their heart is pumping blood highly efficiently. So it doesn't have to beat as often. It's, you know, and so because it doesn't have to beat as often, you know, their heart rate is going to naturally be lower. So we probably need to take that into account if we are designing exercise intensity. So this is where we have the Karvonen method. Now the Karvonen method or the heart rate reserve method, this is the one I encourage you to use the most often, okay? This is the one that I think is pretty darn accurate. You know, again, VO2 max, always going to be better. It's going to be the best. But it's for how accurate it is and how much trouble it is, it's the best. You know what I mean? Like VO2 max is the most accurate, but it's a pretty high barrier to entry. It's kind of a pain in the butt, right? Karvonen formula, barrier to entry is really low, still pretty gosh darn accurate. This is the one I definitely encourage you to use if you're going to use heart rate monitors, right? And use actual numbers on the heart rates. So this formula is a little bit more complex, kind of a pain in the butt. But the Karvonen formula, oh, and this number here, you know, that's their max heart rate. We're trying to calculate target heart rate. You know, after all of this, and target heart rate equals, you know, a percentage of these numbers. So it's like heart rate max times desired intensity. Okay, so that's our formula for this, right? And that's what we were trying to get overall. So let's put that in a box. Okay, so now Karvonen formula. So the Karvonen formula, you do need some more data, but it's all data that you should be getting from your client, right? And so we got 40, we need their age, 43 years old. We also need to know what their resting heart rate is. Let's say this client's resting heart rate is 72 beats per minute. Okay. Cool. Now we have all the information we need to do the Karvonen formula. So that is going to be, you know, target heart rate equals, and this is a long formula, I apologize, but it's good. Heart rate max minus heart rate rest times intensity. And then you got to add the heart rate rest back on at the end. Okay. So you do need to make sure you do this in order. So brackets are actually pretty important here. You got to make sure if you're using like the iPhone really goofs this up. You got to make sure, like if you just put this whole formula in your phone, just like straight, and you just go left to right, it won't give you the right number. So you do got to make sure you do heart rate max minus heart rate rest. Then you got to multiply that by your intensity. Then you add the resting heart rate back on at the end. Okay. So in Bob's case, right, his target heart rate is going to be, and this is where we're going to have to do our desired intensity, in the middle of the formula. So his max heart rate, we'll say, is 178 minus his resting heart rate of 72 times, we're going to say, desired intensity of 70%. And then we're going to add that 72 back on at the end. Okay. And we got to put our brackets in there. So bracket, parentheses, PEMDAS, all that good stuff. Right. And then I got to do this again because I want him to be anywhere between, sorry, this should be 60%. And I want him to be between 70%. Right. So let's go ahead and do that math. 178 minus 172, 106 times 0.6, 60%. That's 63 plus 72. So that's 135. And 178 minus 72 times 0.7 plus 72, 146. So there's Bob's targets, right? I would say, hey, before I was taking it easy on him. His routine was a little gentler than it needed to be. So now I'd say, you know what, Bob, I was wrong. I recalculated. I want your heart rate to be, if it gets below 136, hit that plus sign. If it gets above 143, hit that minus sign. And you'll notice that like the range here is actually pretty narrow. Like that's only a different, like 140, like 136 to 143. That's a difference of 7 beats per minute, right? Let's go back to our original version. Just use the classic like max heart rate formula. That was 107. To 125. That's a difference of 18 beats per minute. So this is also way more accurate to my client. So it's really got a ton of benefits. And the carbon form, and for the record, guys, you're not going to need to do this math. I mean, I'm sure you're both capable, but it's super easy. Just go carbon in, calculator. It's sad he's gotten bumped down to the second ranking here, but I've been using this since 2006. Like, no mistake. Like, this website has not changed at all. And you just punch in your name. So Bob was 43. His resting heart rate was 73. Right? That's what I said. 72. Bob's resting heart was 72. I hit calculate here. There's my old numbers, right? So there's my 106 to 124, right? But down here, 135 to 146. Or I can make it harder next month, 175 to 85, right? And you're going to continue. And what's going to happen is you're going to continually retest and reassess your client. Bob's been getting 60 to 70% cardio. I can make that harder over time. Maybe he gets better at cardio. Maybe he really ends up like improving cardiovascularly. So now I take him to 70 to 80% or 80 to 90%, right? So those numbers are going to shift as well. But I'm reassessing him, and maybe his resting heart rate goes from 73 to 72 to 71 to 70 to 69, right? His heart gets stronger over time. I'm reassessing him. That's shifting all my formulas, and I'm just giving him new targets to hit, which is why I really do encourage you guys, get a heart rate monitor. It is fantastic. You can use, just going to go to Amazon. You can use the classic like heart rate monitors that you'll find out there. Oh, these are all the medical ones. You can use like a fitness tracker, like this, like a really simple one. This is using probably the green or the red light behind it, which my watch is dead right now, so I can't show you. But it'll just kind of the way that tech works is like, yeah, there you go. You can see in this picture. See that little green light right there? It basically shines that light through your skin, and it's watching as blood goes rushing by. There's the finger ones too. There's like the fitness trackers that are just like rings. They're not bad, guys. If you want to use that with your clients, you totally can. Like, give it to your clients, have them use that. They're really not bad. But I will say this: they get less accurate the faster your heart rate goes. Oh, we lost Bobby Tony. So they are a little bit, they're a little bit less accurate than they should be. The faster your heart rate is, the less accurate these are. 'Cause, like as your heart starts beating faster, it all looks like one, kind of big, fast rushing heart rate. So your heart rate's usually actually probably a little higher than the fitness tracker is actually reading. So anyway, take that into account. If you really want like a really good one, you can get like a GPS. Like if you're going to take running seriously, I would recommend get a GPS watch with heart rate monitor, and make sure you get the one that has the chest strap or the chest strap slash the wrist version. I have the, I don't think they make it anymore, because it's old. I've had mine for over a decade. But the Garmin 245, I think, is it still around? Yeah, kinda. I guess so. I guess the line is still around. It looks very different than mine. Um, but it was like $200. It's got GPS monitoring, so I can like, God, that is actually still, maybe that does look like mine. Mine's just so worn out. But yeah, it's cool. It can tell you what your VO2 max is. It can kind of run some calculations. It does do the green light under the skin, but it also syncs up with the chest strap monitor. So it has both. If it ever reads the chest strap monitor, it stops doing the wrist version. If there's no chest strap monitor around, it switches to the wrist version. So I really like that. If you're going to take your cardio super seriously, you're really going to get into it, I would recommend getting something like that. I think that is a game changer when it comes to training. That is my rant on nerdy cardio equipment. Oh, actually, I will say chest strap monitors, the way they work. So the wrist strap ones, again, they're just kind of watching your blood rush by. The chest strap monitors, your heart beats right around like -3 millivolts of electricity. So the chest strap monitors are actually just like monitoring for when that much electricity is sort of like bursted. Because your heart is pretty much the only thing that's like doing exactly that much electricity. So you wear the chest strap monitor, and it's actually monitoring every time your heart beats, like perfectly accurately. It can lose the signal here and there, so you got to make sure you're wearing the right spot. But for the most part, like if you really want like dead accuracy, get your chest strap monitor. Cool. So that's all that. Now there are METs as well, metabolic equivalents. These are good. They're my favorite. It's an estimation of how much energy is burned through physical activity. Basically, one MET is you at rest. So if you are burning 4 METs per hour, you are burning 4 times as many calories as you would be if you were sitting at home on the couch. That's how I like to use METs. There's some big fancy math involved. They're not super, she even said in the video, she's like, it's not super common to use METs in the gym, but you will sometimes see it. If you've ever been on a treadmill or a spin bike or something, and it'll say like, hey, you've burned 6.2 METs, and you're like, what the heck is a MET? That's what a MET is. It means you burn 6.2 times as many calories as you would have if you were watching movies at home. I was trying to think of a current TV show. I couldn't, I blank. We were watching The Bachelor at home. Now, other ways to monitor intensity, you've also got the RPE method. So this is probably the one that has gotten really popular in the last few years. It's just super easy. It's approachable, and your clients can understand it pretty simple. And that is the rating of perceived exertion. So literally, when I asked Danielle earlier, I was like, hey, how hard did you think that was? She's like, it's like a 6. I'm like, okay, well, I want you at a 7. So let's make it a little bit tougher, right? So you're monitoring things like how hard you're breathing, how much you're sweating, how difficult the exercise is. Just make sure you encourage your client not to base it only on how hard one particular body part might be working. That's one way that can kind of goof things up. You're like if your legs are burning, sure, but if your heart's keeping up, chances are your legs can keep burning. So like we mean of overall rating of perceived exertion. Now I will say I was, like I said, just using the 1 to 10 scale, which is what you should totally use with your clients. The original scale was actually 6 to 20, which is psychopathic. Uh, like what a weird, why 6 to 20? What a weird scale. I will say it does somewhat make sense if you think of the original heart rate formula as 220 minus your age, and you think about like most of these formulas are generated in college with around 20-year-old college students. And if it's in an exercise department, someone's resting heart rate's probably right around 60. So 6 to 200 or 60 to, sorry, 60 to 200 or 6 to 20. That's where the Borg scale kind of came in. And exercise started around around 130 beats per minute, which makes sense. So that is why exercise starts around a 13 on the Borg scale, 14, 15. Nobody uses that. No, none of your clients speak Borg. It's too stupid of a scale. 6 to 20 is too hard to conceptualize for most people. So just make it 1 to 10, and break it down. You want your client at a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. That's the easiest way to do it. So here's all of those formulas on one page in the PowerPoint here. Is also in your textbook. But yeah, we've got VO2 max, we got max heart rate, we got heart rate reserve, which is probably the best. METs, which is probably the most abstract. RPE, oh, for the record, RPE is also really good. That's probably the other best, right? Just asking your client consistently, how hard do you think this is? Oh, and there is one more version of the Borg scale. There's also the talk test. So this is the other version I did with you, Bobby. This was the hey, I want you breathing hard, but I don't want you out of breath. So you're going to break it down into basically 3 versions. Breathy, but should be able to hold a conversation super comfortably, no problem at all. That's your, level 1. Level 2, right? That is breathing is hard, but not impossible. You can hold a conversation, but it's kind of hard to talk. And then 3 is like, I'm not talking. I am out of breath. It is impossible for me to hold a conversation. So you break it down into those 3 kind of zones and say, this is where I want you, or this is where I want you, depending. All right, so those are our intensities. Any questions on that, guys? Questions, comments, concerns?
It's pretty in depth, though. I will say that.
Yeah,
Nope. No, thank you.
a lot of methods out there. Like I said, just use the carbonate method and then say, hey, I want your heart rate from here to here. Look, you'll use that 99 out of 100 times.
You just never know where you're going to be prompted to use that geometry that we use in school that we never have had to use. But now
Right.
it shows up. Like I took a sewing class a couple of weeks ago, and that's when
Oh, fun.
geometry kicked in. So I'm looking at this, I feel the same way. Like you never know.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
Yeah. Who thought I was going to mention PEMDAS?
right.
Who had that on their bingo card? Not me. Yeah. Okay. So let's give you guys 10, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up the rest of the fit principles.
Right.
Lovely.
Yep. 10:54, guys. All right. So continuing on with our fit principles, we've done frequency, we've done intensity. Let's take a look at time. Time, way easier. We spent like 20 minutes on frequency or intensity. Time is the length of time in a given activity. Okay, so 2 hours and 30 minutes a week is recommended, again, to combat the effects of heart disease. That's 150 minutes a week, 30 minutes a day, Monday through Friday. It's not even 30 minutes a day every day, just Monday through Friday. Or an hour and 15 minutes a week, that's 75 minutes, high intensity. So if you can just do 15 minutes every day of like high intensity where you are, getting relatively out of breath, you'll be in a pretty darn good spot. That could be as little as waking up in the morning, doing a 5-minute little stretch, getting out the door, going for a light jog, and coming back and then getting in the shower and starting the rest of your day. 30 minutes every morning, waking up a little bit earlier, I say 30 minutes, and that's only 15 minutes of high intensity, 15 minutes of the actual work stuff, to really have like a lot of positive benefits to avoid, a lot of the negative impacts of heart disease. So That's a recommendation. Or the equivalent. There's obviously, going to the gym and doing all the other stuff. I will say, this is very similar to how I talk about nutrition sometimes. Um, the cardio stuff, really important to keep your heart healthy. The food stuff, really also important to keep your heart healthy, but you can't eat your way to a good posture. Likewise, you're not going to run your way or cardio your way to a good posture. I would recommend having some strength training in there and some mobility and core stuff as well. But, in terms of just the cardiovascular conversation, yeah, just a little bit of physical activity a day, really, really good for you. Now, do you go for a jog? What's the mode? Are you getting on a bike, a piece of cardio equipment, strength training? What is it? All of it's good. Like all of it is good. Now there is like high intensity interval training. You've probably heard of that. HIIT training, which are shorter bouts of really high intensity, near maximal effort, followed by lots of recovery. The nice thing about HIIT is that you end up using so much type 2 muscle to get it done because you are working so hard at a high intensity that it actually takes longer for you to recover, which is detrimental in the sense that like you're going to recover more slowly, but it's also beneficial in the sense that you will continue to burn calories after exercise. HIIT training has been shown to generate really high levels of what is called EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. It's actually an elevated calorie burn that takes place after exercise. So EPOC, and it is where essentially your heart, you do a bunch of work, but then your body has to kind of like slowly recover to that, right? So let's say like you peak here, right? Your body has to kind of work hard and your temperature is much higher and elevated, even up to 72 hours. Now obviously at 72 hours, you'll notice it's pretty much negligible, but that's one of the benefits to high intensity interval training is that you sort of accumulate what we call oxygen debt. And then your body has to pay that debt off, by burning extra calories over time. That's one of the benefits to high intensity. But obviously it's more intense, it's harder. It could be, maybe the heart won't recover as well. And it can sometimes lead to overtraining, which is certainly not good. That can do more damage than anything. If you are creating so much stress that your body cannot recover from that stress, that puts you at a higher cardiovascular risk. So while I really like HIIT training, it's not for everybody, Other versions of HIIT training, you've got Tabata training. Tabata is actually where you are going to do 20 seconds of maximum effort, followed by about 10 seconds of recovery. And you're going to do that for 8 rounds. This was one of the original versions of interval training that existed. And so you think about that math, that's 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, that's 30 seconds. You think about doing it for 8 rounds, that is 4 minutes. So you're doing 4 minutes of high intensity. So if you were already going for a jog and you were already like up to speed, you would sprint for 20 seconds, rest for 10, sprint for 20 seconds, rest for 10, and you would repeat that for 8 rounds. And it's a pretty friggin' hard 4 minutes. That is our original version of Tabata. Could be 20 seconds of burpees with 10 seconds of rest, if you want to do a version like that. There's a lot of different versions that you can do. I will say Tabatas are a really helpful tool when you have a little bit of extra time at the end of your session because maybe things went a little bit faster than you were expecting. It's a good way to burn up some energy at the very end. There's also fartlek training, which is a really fun word to say. Fartlek training is Swedish. It means speed play. And it's where you are going to do equal amounts work and equal amounts rest with some moderate work in the middle. So the original version was 400-meter sprint, 400-meter recovery, 800 fast, 800 recovery, 1600 fast, 1600 recovery. So that was like this really large version. It was used for marathon runners, considering that, that's a lot. But easier versions, you could do 60 seconds on, 60 seconds recovery, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds recovery, 60 seconds on, 60 seconds recovery, 90 seconds on, 90 seconds recovery. That's also a really good way to do your fartlek training. So all 3 of those are good versions of intervals. Intervals are great because, again, you can work harder. And then because you're working harder, you have to recover, and that recovery is actually going to help you burn extra calories. But it should be reserved for the advanced client. Interval training is pretty intense. It's in the name, high intensity. So it's not for everybody. And then there's enjoyment. Nice thing about HIIT training is that it is so freaking hard that your brain, the nice thing about HIIT training a lot of times is that you get to the end of like whatever routine you're doing in class you're doing, you're like, oh, it's over already. It makes things go fast because you're just focused on survival because it's so gosh darn difficult. But that may not be true for everybody. Some people are like, when they're fighting for survival, they're just hating it the whole time, counting the minutes till it's over. So you got to make sure you're picking a cardio routine that your client is going to enjoy and that they're going to adhere to. So enjoyment is the level of pleasure you get from a physical activity. This is why, playing sports or, going for a hike, doing something that's like a little bit more mentally stimulating, can be just such a much more effective tool. They're much more likely to adhere to a program if they like it. Now there's also volume, which is, your VP at the very end here, your volume and progression. Whenever you're designing a cardio routine, make sure that the total amount of work that you're doing, that is your overall total volume. You don't want to do massive amounts of volume with massive amounts of intensity, right? Generally, the higher the volume, the lower intensity the program. And the higher intensity of the program, the lower the volume, right? But it really doesn't take a ton of volume to get some results. Weight loss can be achieved with only 250 minutes a week, right? I mean, think about that. If you were doing, that would be, let's see, 30, 60, yeah, that is just over 30 minutes a day every day. Or it could be, an hour of cardio 3 days a week, an hour of strength training 3 days a week. That's more than enough to see like weight loss, right? General health prevention, you really only need to burn anywhere between 12 and 2,000 calories a week through exercise to see general health improvements. So that's the other thing you can do. You can also just pay attention to how many calories you're burning. That's another way to measure your volume. So there's time, there's intensity, there's calories burned per week. A lot of different ways for you to measure volume. But it is an overall formula of time times intensity times frequency. And then progression. Make sure you are always reassessing your clients, guys. You should always be checking in on see if their goals have changed, see if they've improved. If they've improved, what used to be their workout might not be hard anymore. So now maybe that's their warm-up, So always make sure you're paying attention to progression. Also make sure you're not progressing too quickly. Your client could, end up, if you raise the intensity too fast, your client might end up actually working too hard, and then they can't adhere to the program, they're overtraining, and they're actually going to get worse results overall. So again, general recommendations: 150 minutes per week, moderate intensity is really good for just staving off the detrimental effects of cardiovascular disease. 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity can be even better to actually see health improvements over time. And you don't have to necessarily do this in big, long sessions. You know what I mean? You can break this up multiple times per day, So let's go ahead and look at the components of a cardio routine. Obviously, it's just like lifting. You want to make sure that you have a warm-up and a cool down. So there's two types of warm-ups in the workout world. There are general warm-ups, which is probably what you're thinking of when you think of like a warm-up, It's some generally light stretching with a little bit of cardio just before you get onto the gym floor, Increase your heart rate, increase your respiration rate, metabolically activate some of those tissues so that like those things are ready to work during the gym time, That's your classic general warm-up, and it's really good, Increases tissue temperature, which makes it easier for you to contract your muscles, boosts your metabolic rate, which makes it easier to recover between sets. It expands your muscles by making them nice and warm, which means they're nice and pliable. You're probably not going to tear anything. So big fan. And the other nice thing to a general warm-up is that there is a psychological benefit in terms of just like mental readiness. I love creating like a really simple warm up that you will generally do all the time, and it's almost like reciting a mantra. You know what I mean? Like it's just something that you do consistently. It gets you zoned in and ready to start, the more advanced part of your workout. So general good, in terms of a general warm-up, good recommendations are a little bit of SMR, so self-myofascial release. In terms of if you're doing a cardio routine, calves, hip flexors, and lats are probably your three best bets, for most people. Now, obviously, everybody's posture is different. So that's certainly not the only things you should be doing. You should base it on your client's like posture. But if you do just those with everybody, that's pretty good. Those are the things that are going to work the most during most cardio types. So then you follow that up with some static stretching if you're in level 1, for your calves, hip flexors, and lats, or maybe if you're in level 2, you could do some active stretching. Or if you're in level 3, maybe some dynamic stretches, right? Depends on where your client is on that OPT progression, right? Static stretching before sprinting, not a very good idea. They're going to lose sprinting capacity because they've inhibited their muscles. So active isolated stretches or dynamic stretches are probably going to be your best bet. And then eventually you have your warm-up phase. Then you have your conditioning phase. And your conditioning phase is exactly what you think it is. It is the cardio of the cardio routine, Oh, shoot, I forgot about specific warm-ups. So those are general warm-ups. Sorry, specific warm-ups are specific to the activity that you're performing. So if you are going to do some sprints, then you're probably doing a couple sets of strides where, you're really warming up, doing some general runs just before your sprints, maybe 50% effort, 60% effort, 70% effort, 80% effort, maybe up to 90. Never really doing 100% before your actual workout because, well, that's your workout. But just generally doing the thing that mirrors the physical activity that you're going to be doing that day. In terms of lifting weights, that's warm-up sets, lightweight with just the bar, a little bit heavier, just below your max, and then into your actual lifting. Conditioning phase is the cardio workout, has all of these benefits that we've been talking about the whole time: reduced risk of heart disease, lower resting heart rate, lower perceived exertion in life, all the good stuff, burns calories, mental alertness, all the things. It's a big long list. I'm not going through all those. We all know that cardio is good for you. And then your cool down. And your cool down is restoring you. Now, this is the biggest thing that's easiest to skip. Your cool down is the thing it's like, I came to the gym to work out. I worked out. Now I want to go home. Here's the thing that's interesting about cool downs. It seems like it's the least important because it's like your body should just be able to go back to rest, no problem. But a big part of why cooling down is actually so important is because it's restoring your physiological systems back to baseline. And that is signaling to the body that you won the fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a weird way to say it. But what I mean by that is that, like, your body doesn't know what a lat pull down machine is. Your body doesn't know what a barbell squat is. It doesn't know what working out is, right? It just thinks that you're in combat. It thinks that you're fighting for survival. So it's a fight or flight response. It's stress, right? And it's good because, like, when we trigger stress, our body always triggers anti-stress in response to that once the stress is over. And you'll get that benefit even without a cool down, I will say. But if you take the time to do your cool down, reduce your resting heart rate back to neutral slowly, gradually return your core temperature back to neutral, return your body, do some stretching afterwards, stretch out and, like, re-lengthen those muscles. Because you just spend an hour, like, contracting them. So re-lengthening them out afterwards to promote blood flow and prevent blood from pooling in one place. That's actually going to signal to your body that you won the fight and that it's time for the rest and digest. It's time for the recovery to kick in. And so not only is the mental fatigue, and you think about mental fatigue, it's not just the day you're doing it, it's accumulating over the week, right? Just like work, It's like, oh God, Monday, but Monday's not really that bad. you're fresh off the weekend. You should feel great on Mondays,
Right.
But by Friday, your brain is soup, you're worn out, everything's tired. And so you need to recovery again. So, you know, it's even like, you do something on Friday night. My wife and I say this all the time. It's like the weekend seems so much longer when you do a little something on Friday night, Um, it's the same thing with like a cool down. It's like you're signaling, hey, the stress is over. Let's get into rest and digest mode. Um, so suggested cool down activities, pretty much identical to your warm-up activities. A little bit of cardio, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, right? Although instead of getting gradually harder, you're getting gradually easier. A little bit of SMR, roll those muscles out, a little bit of static stretching, and home. Get your smoothie, All right. So that's our warm up. That's our cool down. Let's go ahead and take a look at the workout. Let's look at this conditioning stuff. So another video for you here. This is going to talk about like how, similar to NASM's levels, NASM is going to have we call stage training, different stages within the levels, which is, by the way, the same. It's totally the same, but
I've always fancied myself a pretty outgoing, dramatic person. So I am very excited to embark on our journey into stage training. To be or not to be, that is the question. Wait a second. Not that stage training? There's a chapter in the CPT training about this. That's what I'm supposed to talk about. Okay. You watch the title screen, and I'm going to change.
It's really funny. That is the only skit or sketch or like NASM trying to be like overly intentionally funny in this whole thing. It just comes out of nowhere. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a great intro, actually. But it's hilarious that it's literally the only one. Like they never do anything like that ever again.
The purpose of stage training for fitness professionals is to ensure that cardiorespiratory training programs progress in an organized fashion to minimize the risk of overtraining and injury. As with any other form of fitness training, this falls under the principle of specificity. Specifically speaking, according to the principle of specificity, the body will adapt to the level of stress placed on it and will then require more or varied amounts of stress to produce a higher level of adaptation in the future. So, if your client starts jogging for 30 minutes, 5 days a week, they will, over time, become more aerobically fit. Consequently, they will need to increase the duration or intensity of each jogging session to experience continual fitness improvements. To accomplish this goal, cardio exercise programs should be tailored to the individual, using their own unique metabolic markers as a guide for proposing exercise intensities. The 5 stages of cardio training that we're going to talk about use different intensities or training zones. Each one targets a specific outcome while remaining customizable for clients. Because of this, it's a versatile method that works for new exercisers, fitness enthusiasts, and performance athletes alike. Stage 1 is the lowest intensities of exercise and is used to introduce individuals to exercise, improve general health and fitness, and as a recovery format following higher intensity exercise sessions. Stage 1 involves steady-state aerobic exercise to help improve cardio fitness levels in apparently healthy sedentary clients using a target intensity below ventilatory threshold 1. So, when using the talk test method to monitor training intensity, the client should be able to easily hold a conversation during the activity. If you're using RPE to measure intensity, the client should feel the exercise intensity as light to moderate. The exerciser is starting to sweat, but they can still carry on a conversation effortlessly. In stage 1, clients should start slowly and gradually work up to 30 minutes of continuous activity. Those who can maintain a zone 1 intensity for at least 30 minutes 3 times per week will be ready for stage 2. Bear in mind, a deconditioned client might need 2 to 3 months before they are ready to move on to the next stage, depending on their current fitness level and how often they exercise. The goal of stage 1 training is to help clients build an appropriate aerobic base and foundational level of fitness. This stage may also serve as a motivation tool to help clients adhere to a physically active lifestyle, since clients are more likely to continue with an exercise program that is challenging yet achievable. As with any exercise program, keep an eye on the rate of progression and gradually add duration to each exercise session. It's important not to exceed more than 10% of added volume per week to avoid overtraining or burnout. Stage 2 is designed for clients with moderate cardio fitness levels who are ready and desire to begin training at a slightly higher intensity. The focus of stage 2 training is on increasing the workload through things like speed and incline. It's an ideal stage for fitness enthusiasts who regularly engage in physical activity or recreational sport, or for those seeking further improvements in cardiovascular endurance or weight loss. Prior to initiating a stage 2 workout, fitness professionals should perform the talk test with their client to determine their client's heart rate at VT1. Once identified, this measurement should be used to monitor exercise intensity throughout the duration of the stage 2 workout. Stage 2 is also the introduction to aerobic interval training, in which intensities are varied throughout the workout. A stage 2 workout consists of a mix of recovery intervals just below VT1 and work intervals at an intensity just above VT1. Interval training like this is going to improve both physical fitness and health markers, such as reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease. For clients new to interval training, it's a good idea to alternate stage 1 and stage 2 workouts. For example, you could start with stage 1 on Monday, move to stage 2 on Wednesday, return to stage 1 on Friday, and then the next week start with stage 2 and alternate from there. It'll become important to rotate the stages to keep workouts balanced as you get to stage 3 and beyond. Now, these guidelines can be changed based on the client's training schedule, available recovery time, and unforeseen external stressors like lack of sleep. Once clients are used to stage 2 intervals and have shown positive signs of adapting to the physical demands, they can begin with moderately intense, steady-state cardio exercise above VT1 if desired. No intervals needed. It's important to note that stage 2 steady-state aerobic exercise is not a requirement, but more like an option for clients who prefer that instead of intervals. Just a thought. Okay, now we progress to stage 3. Stage 3 is for the moderately advanced client who has the right cardiorespiratory fitness base established. Stage 3 training increases the capacity of aerobic and anaerobic energy systems and is meant for clients looking to push their exercise capacity even further. To accurately program stage 3 intervals, measurements of VT1 and VT2 need to be recorded. A stage 3 program includes moving in and out of training zones 1, 2, and 3 while always staying below zone 4. The general rule of thumb is to have modest mix of time spent in zone 1 with brief interval periods in zones 2 and 3 to minimize overtraining while simultaneously providing enough overload to challenge energy systems needed for performance adaptations. Zone 2 and Zone 3 intervals should be client-specific based on their goals, needs, and abilities. And Zone 2 intervals are typically longer than Zone 3 intervals because Zone 3 intervals are more intense and physically demanding. Also, the volume of training in Stage 3 should be progressive in a slow and gradual fashion. If that sounds a little intense, well, It is. Stage 3 isn't appropriate for all clients. People looking for more modest improvements in cardio fitness who are new to exercise and individuals who are averse to high intensity training don't need to move on to stage 3. And again, make sure to rotate all 3 stages. Do things like a stage 1 day as a recovery day following a hard stage 3 training day. Now, are we ready to move on to the stage 4? Yeah, we are. Let's do it. Stage 4 is for the advanced client who has reached a high level of cardio fitness. This stage increases the capacity of the anaerobic energy system and should be reserved for athletes and top-end fitness competitors. Like stage 3, measurements of VT1 and VT2 need to be recorded to accurately program stage 4 intervals. A stage 4 workout includes moving in and out of all 4 training zones. A general rule of thumb is to have most of the time spent in zone 1 with brief intervals in zones 2, 3, and 4 to be sure your client is working at maximum performance rather than maximal effort. As with all the stages, but even more important here, workouts should be client-specific, based on the client's goals, needs, and abilities. The volume of training should be slow and gradual. If your client ever shows signs of overtraining like trouble sleeping, excessive fatigue, impaired performance, loss of appetite, or mood swings, back off of the volume and intensity of stage 4 workouts so they can have more recovery time between exercise sessions. Stage 5. Stage 5? How can there be a stage 5? Didn't we just say stage 4 is for the mega athletes? Is stage 5 for superhero training? Okay, no. Stage 5 is also pretty intense. It's just a shift in process. Stage 5 consists of sport-specific training and is applicable for all types of athletes. It focuses on drills that help improve conditioning. In stage 5, you will use linear, multidirectional, and sport-specific activities for conditioning, and often combines high-intensity interval training with small-sided games and agility drills. This stage incorporates the movements, skills, and drills that coaches often use in practice sessions to apply a sport-related stimulus for metabolic benefits. The timing of the drills, the amount of rest, and the length of the session can progressively increase to more stressful game-like sessions as fitness improves and competition approaches. While ventilatory testing and heart rate monitoring is not required during stage 5, your client could benefit from monitoring heart rates or RPE during specific drills to get a picture of the relative intensity of the session. While consistent aerobic exercise is important for optimal sport preparation, be sure to avoid excessive training volume at the highest intensities. Similar to stage 4 training, volume should be kept at a minimum, especially when exercise sessions involve maximal effort. Regular recovery and hydration periods also have to be included to ensure an optimal training response. There you have it. For most weight loss clients and those new to exercise, stage 1 and stage 2 are going to be the most appropriate and effective for improving health, wellness, and promoting a healthy body weight. These 2 stages should be top priority for the average exerciser and gym goer. Stages 3 through 5 are, as I'm sure you've gathered, for athletes and advanced fitness enthusiasts who are seeking greater improvement in cardiorespiratory conditioning and are willing to participate in high-intensity exercise. You don't have to get into all 5 stages with every client. Cardiorespiratory exercise, like everything else, should be individualized based on the client's needs, goals, abilities, and exercise preferences. So, even if I was confused by the term stage training, don't forget, all the world's a stage, and your role of a CPT is going to be one of the most important in your life. And with that, I shall say, Good night. Good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow.
Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at stage training here. Very dramatic, yeah. Hold on, I gotta put me back on here.
Yeah, that was pretty dramatic, I will say. I didn't see that coming.
Nope, no one ever does. All right, let's take a look at these zones here, right? So stages and zones, right? I'm going to break these down very similar. I like to think of them as like stage one is very similar to level one of NASM's OPT, stage two, and stage three. Stage four is where, yeah, you're getting into like the really high intensity stuff. And eventually you have like the full blown like athletic potential, right? So we're breaking our stages down into zones 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, these are each going to be like whether or not you are moving from, low intensity the entire time. That's like steady state cardio, moderate intensity, which is more like going for like a pretty heavy run where you might, be using some hills or something, into like vigorous or really hard stuff, which is like sprinting, getting fully out of breath, and probably needing to like walk, recover, or very light jog recover. And then eventually you get into zone 4, just full blown high intensity sprints, followed by long bouts of, intense recovery, right? So you think about like what zone 1 is, right? We got a little table here, but I have it all in my notes here. So this is below ventilatory threshold 1, or below where we are breathing with any difficulty, right? So this is a 12 to 13 on the RPE scale, the original Borg scale, which is a 3 to 4, right? In terms of like modified. That's not super crazy difficult, right? The idea here is that you are probably, you'll oftentimes see, if you look up like cardiorespiratory training zones, you'll oftentimes see this listed as, very, very light, 50, maybe 60% heart rate max. Okay, pretty gentle there. This is probably what you're using as a warm-up, but for some people, this could be where they start with cardio, right? So they might start to sweat just a little bit, but they should be able to hold a conversation pretty effortlessly the entire time. So again, think of it this way, guys. Like in terms of rating of perceived exertion, probably using the modified Borg scale, so 3 to 4. Tell your client this is not intense, right? Or you could say the talk test. They should be able to hold a conversation the entire time. Okay. This is somebody who literally get out, go for a walk. This is low intensity. This is probably a long duration. Hopefully they can get 30 minutes in, right? Then you have your zone 2. And this is your ventilatory threshold 1, which again is where you are just getting to like where you're breathing hard up to your midpoint, right? And then ventilatory threshold 2 is where you're fully out of breath. So we're halfway between, we're breathing hard, or sorry, we're halfway between like where we're starting to breathe hard and where we are actually breathing hard, right? So that's an RP of 14 to 15 or 5 to 6 on the Borg scale. You're probably sweating a little bit more, and you're probably feeling a little bit of that breath behind. But you should still be able to talk continuously. It just is becoming a little bit more challenging, right? Again, this is probably somewhere between 60 and 70% heart rate max. This is where a lot of times your clients are going to stall for a while. They're going to move through this pretty quickly. And they're probably going to be bouncing between like here and here, like zones 2 and 3, pretty for quite a while before they like really have like a good established baseline, long-term cardio capacity, right? So I should go through this. So stage 1, right? Individuals who are brand new to exercise, you are below ventilatory threshold 1. You are not even really breathing very hard. You're just building your aerobic base. This could also just be somebody who just needs to like get used to being up and doing something for 30 continuous minutes, right? So you might warm them up for 5 to 10 minutes, and then just 30 minutes where they're on the treadmill, they're on the cardio equipment, whatever it happens to be, really just able to hold a conversation the whole time, right? Stage 2, this is where we're starting to introduce that more challenging, where it might be a little bit harder. They might do 1 minute where they're at like a light jog, where they get a little bit out of breath, but not, I shouldn't say out of breath. They start breathing a little harder, but they're not out of breath, right? And then 3 minutes back into that gentle recovery. And that 1-to-3 ratio is going to serve them pretty well for quite a while. So you do that for 30 minutes. Let's see, this is 5 minutes to warm up here, 30 minutes in the workout. So that's 4 minutes around, 30 divided by 4. They're doing about 7, maybe 8 rounds of this, right? So just back and forth of that, and just keep an eye on the treadmill, keep an eye on those numbers. Then we get into stage 2 cardio, where our client's a little bit more advanced, where, eventually we start to change this ratio, right? So you might keep a client here for a really quite a long time, but the ratio does start to change over time. So they may start, let's say, something like this, where it's like, 3 minutes, we'll say off, and then 1 minute, we'll say on, right? And that's where it starts. And eventually it becomes 2 and 2, right? Eventually it's 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, until eventually it's like 1 minute on, 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, until eventually they're able to really maintain that heart rate at steady state for quite a while, right? And they can just stay in that zone 2. This is still stage 2 cardio. This is still just above. They're not out of breath, but they are breathing hard. They can maintain breathing relatively hard for a full 30-minute workout. So this is where, like I said, you're really probably going to stay right in this area for quite some time, but you'll blast through this area fast, right? Like I said earlier, like a lot of improvements happen pretty quickly early on. You get your enzymes, boom, you can start moving into this. You're going to stay a while. And then we're going to slowly adjust that, a really simple progression, guys. Yeah, Danielle, 1 second here. Really simple progression is 30 days of 1 minute on, 3 minutes off, and then 30 days later, 2 and 2, and then 30 days later, reverse it, and it's 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, until eventually you try to do a full-blown 30-minute sustained zone 2. So still moderately easy routine. Question, Danielle.
So I have a question for you. Oftentimes, when you're running, let's say we're doing, okay, let's put it in meters. Let's say we're doing, let's say we're doing 4 miles.
Okay.
Consistent jogging rate. You ever see people who are trying to talk and they're completely out of breath? They're using all their force to talk. Do you recommend, I don't even know if it's a recommendation, but it's always seemed very odd to me. Like, why would you exasperate, your energy trying to talk when it would interfere with your ability to get enough oxygen to carry you the length of your run? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I imagine some of that is probably like, I liken that to a rant that I made recently, talking about this card game. I think for some people, the main reason they're probably doing that is because they are probably way more interested in what they are talking about and the conversation they're having, the social aspect of it, than they are interested in the exercise. I think at the most simple answer to your question is that people like conversing way more than they like working out.
More like a distraction to get them through.
And maybe there's that as well. Or they see that distraction as more valuable than the breath they're losing. They may not even really be thinking it's like, well, yeah, obviously this is making it harder on me because I'm talking. But at the same time, like they probably, they're like, but the benefit that I'm getting mentally avoiding thinking about how hard this is making up for that. It's filling in that gap,
I witness it so much and I just laugh. I'm like, and the other person that's running with them was like, like, I just want to get through this, but I'm not listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a matter of taste. You know what I mean? But I will say, if you're going to use the talk, if you are going to be a very talkative person like that, use the talk test. You know what I mean? Like that's the best way for you to monitor intensity. Like if your sentences are going from this long to this long,
Mhm.
great. That tells you exactly like here's your work, here's your rest, here's your work, here's your rest, you know?
Gotcha.
Like if you're gonna already be like that, use it, use it as your tool of measurement, that's great.
Gotcha.
But yeah, eventually you'll get into where that zone 2, is there, and you can just, like I said, you can just kind of stay in it. Now eventually we move into like our stage 3 cardio, right? So stage 2 kind of existed in two different ways. Stage 3 is where it starts to get a little bit more intense, right? We're actually going to incorporate zone 3, which is like your midpoint to out of breath. Okay, so this is when I say out of breath, I mean like talking is difficult, where it's like, oh, really broken, whoo, sentences, like you are breathing. Um, that's where we're starting to get into like our ventilatory threshold 2. This is vigorous breathing. Talking is limited to short sentences, right? Your RPE is probably a 16 to 17. This is like a 7 to 8 in terms of difficulty, which again, 7 to 8 is starting to match up with what we're seeing here. This is where we're actually starting to see like probably improvements in aerobic fitness, right? Like real, true, tangible, like your VO2 max is improving. Your body's like, all right, clearly I am not good enough at this cardio stuff. I need to make more mitochondria. Like you're starting to see adaptations. What's nice is where, again, like this, you're going to stay probably in stage 2 for quite a while, but stage 3, you're working hard enough that you actually are putting tangible stress on the body to see real tangible improvements. So this might be where you might spend, again, you're not going to be able to stay in stage 3 or zone 3. You're not going to be able to stay in zone 3 consistently the whole time, right? So instead, you might do something where maybe you do 1 minute or 2 minutes in zone 2, 1 minute in zone 3, and then maybe you can alternate 1 and 1 and 1, right? This gets a little chaotic here, but like, it might be the same progression we saw here, just in these different zones. So maybe 1 minute in zone 3, 3 minutes in zone 2. You don't really have to drop back into zone 1 anymore, right? Because you've improved so much, right? But you might start here and recover here and just bounce back and forth. 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. And eventually you can get to a place where it's like 1 minute on, 1 minute off, right? Or you could do some fartlek training, right? You do 3 minutes on. You're probably not gonna, I'm sorry, you're probably not gonna do that. Probably do 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off, 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off, 30, 30. And then switch it. So 30, 30, 60, 60, 90, 90, back to 60, 60, back to 30, 30. So it's like you work your way up a pyramid, work your way down that pyramid. That's your kind of classic fartlek training. Um, and then eventually we get into zone 4 or stage 4. This is like where we're starting to incorporate full-blown maximal effort. We are incorporating zone 4, right? Maybe even like full-blown like zone 5, which is like true maximum effort, right? We get really up here, 90 to 100% of your heart rate max. This is where it gets friggin' tough. You are not maintaining zone 4 for more than 30 seconds, because that's how truly challenging it is. So this is where we start to get into true high intensity interval training. Now you can work your way up to that. You can see here they warmed up, they get into zone 2, which is their recovery zone. Then they go into zone 3. Then they only do 10 seconds in here, right? So they're doing like this is like 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I think honestly, this example that Nassim's giving here is kind of chaotic to me. I do think you could probably keep this up for 30 if you wanted to, like true like 30 if you get really good at it, right? I love like 2 minutes, 30 seconds there. That's a really round number. This whole 1 minute, 10 second thing, their example in the book is really, it's just not using numbers that people like really think in very often. So it's not my favorite example, but conceptually it's still very good. But yeah, this is where you are really like progress that out, like 10 seconds of maximum effort. And then you'll notice, look at this, they're fully recovering back in zone 1. This is where you are probably jumping the rails on a treadmill. What I mean by that is like you are sprinting and then you jump your feet to the side and you just stand there. I have a workout that I love that is exactly this. And it's 20 seconds of maximum effort followed by 40 seconds of recovery for however many. I usually do like, I'll do 20 rounds. I'll do 20 minutes, right? And so I'll get on the treadmill. I will usually crank the speed up to like a 10. I'll crank the incline up to just a little bit, maybe like a 3 or a 4 or 5. And then I will sprint on that 20 seconds really hard, and then I'll actually just jump the rails. I just stand there for 40 seconds. And then just repeat that back and forth. And that gets my heart rate really, really high. By the end of those rounds, by the end of that 20 minutes, I am struggling. And that's where you're getting in, like zone 4, recover, and I'm fully recovering back in zone 1. I'm resting, you know? But the harder the work, the harder the rest, right? So this is above your VT2. You are fully out of breath here. That perceived exertion is a 9 or a 10. Breathing is pretty much impossible during those hard intervals, you know, and during most of your recovery, if I'm being honest. And sometimes that recovery can get longer, you know, it can be even 3 minutes off. Like I said, I like the 1-to-2 ratio, like twice as much rest for how much work I'm doing when I'm doing that version. But that is something I had to work up to. You could take 5 times as much rest, 10 times as much rest if you really, truly need to. And then there's the stage 5 stuff, which is like where you are probably doing specific workouts during like a sporting event. This is like practice, this is conditioning. You know, this is probably something that is very sport specific. And that is like where you're doing advanced like sports drills. You might be doing some strength training in between your sets, right? This is very, very specific to that. And that is maximum effort as well. So this is the like stage 5, which obviously like doesn't exist in our little zone 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, where is 5, right? That is, again, this is where it is like usually very sport specific. This is probably mid-season in a sport. Really like high intensity stuff. So we're going to break our cardio routines down into stages of cardio routines. Stage 1, you're probably just using zone 1. Stage 2, you're probably going to use zone 2 for work and zone 1 for recovery. Stage 3, you might even get into zone 3 work where, yeah, it is pretty tough. You know, not impossible, not like maximum effort, but still pretty tough. And then recover in 2 and then warm up in 1 until eventually you get into your stage 4 routine, which is maximum intensity work. You might be incorporating zone 4, might incorporate zone 3, but recovering in zone 2, and zone 1 is exclusively a warm up at this point. And then there's the stage 5 cardio, which is the same thing, but you're working through all those different, you know, zones, and it's probably in a sport specific situation, you know, where you might be running ladders on the field, you might be doing a scrimmage, right? Things like that. Now, obviously, all of this, again, your cardiovascular exercise is still very much using your muscles. So there are postural distortions you need to be aware of. Anterior pelvic tilts, that is going to stretch the hamstrings and put way more pressure on the hip flexors. That can lead to dysfunction, right? Forward head posture and rounded shoulders, that's going to lead to decreased oxygen delivery because you're collapsing in on your lungs, and it's going to put stress on the neck. Adducted and rotated knees or pronated feet, that's going to put stress on the knees, leading to things like runner's knee and runner's hip. So again, we are definitely going to make sure that we need to give example. Like if we have clients with forward head and rounded shoulders, they need to make sure they're stretching out their lats and upper body before cardio days, even if they're not doing strength training on those cardio days, right? Anterior pelvic tilt, same thing, working on those hip flexors, activating their glutes. So this is where your warm-ups might include a few body weight, core, balance, or reactive exercises that incorporate some strength training even before cardio. And it's like, why am I doing strength training on my cardio days? It's like, because we need to make sure that like your running form is good before getting into this. And here's the other thing. You could have an advanced runner who has run with poor form for a really long time. They're actually pretty good at cardio. They've gotten good at cardio even with their bad posture over the years. You know, there's a really famous runner out of Ukraine back during World War II, and his name was Emil Zatopek. He's my favorite runner in history. Look him up. And he had horrible form. He was famous for it because he just loved running. He loved cardio. He loved running, and he would literally run in like Russian army combat boots, and he would like make it harder by like carrying his wife on his back. Not the type of training that leads to good running form. But he loved it so much. He was so passionate about it. He still got really good at it, you know? So, you know, oh yeah, I mean, Danielle, sure, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. Here's what's challenging. Hold on, I'll address your question here. Bobby Tony, if you didn't see the question, it says, in your professional opinion, do you think a person truly recovers from a severe hamstring pull? Yes. You know, maybe they needed surgery. They might have some scar tissue. But here's the thing. Can you restore a hamstring muscle back to like operational? Like, yeah, probably. Now here's the thing though. This is the pitfall that most people fall into that they don't really think about. When you are, you know, fixed, is the hamstring fixed? If that's your question, sure. You know what I mean? But what caused the hamstring injury in the first place? Is it habits that you have, you know, and then you didn't address those habits, you just addressed the mechanical problem? Because if you still have those bad habits, you're just going to end up right back in the same place as before. You know, this is a very similar question, even though it's very different topic, to like what happens with like Ozempic, right? Or any of those like simple weight loss things that get you really fast results. Did it result in you losing weight? Yeah, absolutely. Did it fix your weight gain problem? Maybe. Maybe it goes away and you are, you know, and that was enough to psychologically cause you to change your habits. And you're in a really good spot now, you know. But with a lot of people, you hear stories all the time, like with people who got like lap band surgery, gastric bypass, like things like that. They don't go to like their prescribed like therapy as well, where, you know, they're going to meet with someone who's also going to teach them about like healthier eating habits. So they don't go to that. And then they just have a thing that like works for a long time, gets them results they want, but then they end up right back in the same place. So if you had an injury, did that injury happen? And then maybe you had a great surgeon, but if it happened because you have poor form, you know, like hamstring pulls, right? My favorite example, I was a big Ken Griffey Jr. fan when I was a kid because I'm from the Northwest and he was the best. But you look at, you know, Junior, and he was an incredible, incredible athlete, right? But if you look at his posture, my guy had a pretty intense, and you can just see his belt line points down, you know. It's part of what made him probably have, they call it the sweetest swing in baseball. But he had a history of like hamstring problems. So when your hip flexors are tight and, you know, you're rotating your pelvis anteriorly, your hamstrings are in a lengthened position. You are more likely to end up with that problem. So it's like, if you don't address that, you know, you have a history of like, it's like, oh, well, I have bad hamstrings. I tear them all the time, you know, and it's like, do you have bad hamstrings or do you have bad habits? Now, eventually, you know, there is so much mechanical damage there. Maybe you truly can't recover from that much mechanical damage, you know? But I think that's why that question's kind of it depends, you know? I know that's not a very black and white answer. That's not yes or no, but I think it depends. It kind of depends on who the client is and what we mean by a severe injury. So yeah, that's kind of it, guys. How are you feeling about cardio stuff?
You know, it's really interesting we're talking about this because I'm getting back into more cardio. Like I said to you the other day, I've been going on runs in the morning and I miss it. Like running, there's no other. I've tried swimming, I've tried golf, I've tried so many things. There's nothing that gives me that run feel. Like it unlocks things inside of me. It's spiritual, you know?
Yeah. I love hat on, pouring down rain, hoodie up, headphones. That's like one of my favorite, you know, shorts. You know, I love running in the rain.
Nice. Yeah, I've ventured into that. And so I'm getting back into it because at first I was so afraid. I was like, you know what, my knees, my hips, I don't have to have a hip replacement. I don't have to have knee replacements. And I'm at a point where I'm okay with it because
Mm.
running is my thing. I'm accepting it fully. That's my thing.
Yeah, I mean, and then maybe like, taking a look at your running form and like, is it causing aches and pains? Maybe that means that like you can shorten your stride a little bit, switch to a 4-foot strike or something like that. That could
Mhm.
have positive impacts too. And then it becomes a new, it's this thing that you love, but now you've got a new way to approach it, which is kind of fun, you know?
Yeah. So I've been kind of breaking it up. Like I have this whole course where I walk backwards half of it.
Oh, that's good.
I sprint like 75. I do a 75 sprint. I do some ballet stretches and stuff like that in
Ah,
between. So I'm just trying to
yeah,
really be mindful, but get back into it at the same time.
I love that. And walking backwards is really good for your knees. It's really good for eccentric on the quads there, which is great.
Yeah. So
Well,
I feel like I'm back in love.
Ha!
I'm falling back in love. I was out of love. I'm falling back.
I love that.
nice. I don't do much cardio, but I mean, I do walk like maybe three times out of the week. Not
That's
that
right.
far,
Yeah.
but I do walk.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
great.
Hence the
And
last name Walker.
yeah. And then, yeah. Yeah. Do the mall walking.
Uh,
Yeah. Walking is a fantastic form of cardio. It's so low impact, you can do tons of it. It's why, those under the desk treadmills are so popular nowadays.
Yeah. That's
Um,
great.
well, cool guys. Let me kill the recording here.